The Pittsburgh Steelers had a very interesting season last year, and let's go ahead and talk about it. Start with the additions in the offense. And the Pittsburgh Steelers had a pretty decent offseason. I kind of like some of the moves they made. So let's go ahead and talk about them and talk about the preview here for next season. Let's talk about the additions. Nick Kwiatkowski, Keanu Neal, Isaac Sumalo, Patrick Peterson, Cole Holcomb, Larry Ogunjobi, and Allen Robinson, who they traded for. When you talk about the draft, I think they had the best draft in the NFL last year. Broderick Jones, Joey Porter Jr., Keanu Benton, Darnell Washington, and Nick Herbig. And then you look at some of the departures, some of the main departures in Cameron Sutton, Devin Bush, and Terrell Edmonds. But I'm not really worried about that when you add all these guys together on the new team of Pittsburgh. You got Patrick Peterson, who could move into a safety role, possibly. I'm going to be, excited to see Patrick Peterson. They paid some money for Isaac Sumalo to start. I like Cole Holcomb as a pretty decent linebacker. But I really loved their draft. Broderick Jones, you traded just a 4th round pick to move up and go over the Jets and get your offensive tackle. Then you go and somehow get Joey Porter Jr. with the first pick in the 2nd round. I don't know how he fell in the 2nd round, but he did. And then you get Keanu Benton, who I think is one of the most underrated players in this draft. I thought he was pretty much almost a 1st round talent in my opinion. You get Darnell Washington in the 3rd round, who I think can be a very good tight end. And if he's not this amazing pass catcher 5 years from now, he'll be one of the best blockers, one of the best blocking tight ends in the NFL for a very long time, and will find himself on teams no matter how bad of a pass catcher he is, to be honest. And then you get Nick Herbig in day 3, which I think was a very good pick as well, and you pair up the brothers. So, again, very big fan of what they did this offseason. Let's talk about the offensive stats from last year. They were 23rd in total yards per game, 24th in total passing yards per game, 16th in total rushing yards, and 26th in total points per game, which was not good. They had a decent, rushing game. That was pretty solid last year. But when you talk about everything else, they're bottom 10 in the NFL when it came to total yards, total passing yards, and total points per game. So that definitely needs to be upgraded or get better. Obviously some of that has to do with Kenny Pickett. I know Najee Harris was a little injured. Their offensive line wasn't the best last year. But let's go ahead and talk about their team now and what the projected offense is. Their offensive line, I think, has gotten a lot better. You get Broderick Jones, who's a rookie. Isaac Sumalo is a solid guard. Cole Mason, I really love James Daniel. And you get Chukwuma Okorokafor. I think I said that name. Okorokafor. There we go. And again, decent offensive line. Nothing, crazy, but it's doable. It really is solid and can protect Kenny Pickett. And, Kenny Pickett is going to be interesting. Last year, he went ahead, had 2,400 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions in limited play. He didn't start the whole season, but he came in, a tad bit early. I wouldn't say tad bit early, but earlier than, some of the other guys like Desmond Ridder and Sam Howell. But he's going to be the starter, obviously, coming in to this next season. And they did a good job surrounding him with solid weapons. You talk about Najee Harris. He had 1,000 yards. He did have 3.8 average per carry, which I think should go higher. He did have an injury last year, and he had 7 touchdowns. So I think Najee Harris should be fine, for fantasy-wise, just a good running back-wise. I think he will be very good, and I think he'll kind of have somewhat of a breakout season next year and show why he was a 1st-round pick. And then you talk about the offensive weapons when it comes to receiving core. You have Deontay Johnson, who had 800 yards. Now, he didn't have 0 touchdowns, but I think people are overrating that. I think overrating the touchdown number because he was, again, a very good wide receiver. And I hope, another offense, Kenny Pickett the starter, another learning this offense, which I think is, I don't know why Matt Canada is still their offensive coordinator, but he is still their offensive coordinator. And I think Deontay Johnson should be just fine. You had George Pickens, who was a great pick in the 2nd round, 800 yards, 4 touchdowns, made some stellar catches. And it's going to be exciting for George Pickens next year, and I cannot wait to watch that. They bring in Allen Robinson from the Rams, who was not good last year. He was the wide receiver 2 in that offense, and then eventually somewhat of the wide receiver 1, which was bad. But I think as a slot wide receiver 3, I think that's serviceable for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I do think so. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the depth on this offense, because I think some of the receivers are definitely interesting. And Calvin Austin, who was a rookie last year, who is now coming into his second year, and I believe he was injured. I could be wrong. They got Nate Herbig on that offensive line, who I think is, pretty decent. You know what? I totally forgot to talk about Pat Fryermuth, who I think will be an absolute stud of a tight end, who I already think is a stud of a tight end, and maybe even the top 10 tight end in the NFL. And so he should definitely help out Kenny Pickett next year. You have Jalen Warren as a backup running back to Najee Harris, and when Najee Harris was injured, and they definitely went to Jalen Warren a lot this past season. And I wonder if they keep that up, but in my opinion, I think I would still try to go all in with Najee Harris. Obviously, he's gonna take his reps, but I think Najee Harris should be the starter, to be honest. I don't know if you heard that, but there was a motorcycle outside. So I'm excited for the offense. I think it's gotten better. I don't think it'll be a prolific offense. I don't think it'll be a top 10 offense, but it should definitely get the job done to win some games. So let's go ahead and talk about their defense. So when you look at last year in their defensive stats, they were 13th in total yards allowed per game, which is pretty solid. 19th in total passing yards, 9th in total rushing yards, and 10th in allowed total points per game, which again, they had a pretty solid defense. I think it's, again, a pretty good defense. Yards per game isn't bad. Obviously, passing yards isn't the best, and I think they definitely made some upgrades there to hopefully whittle that down a little bit. And then obviously rushing yards, they have a pretty good defensive line, and we all know that. So, again, pretty decent defensive season, but I think it can definitely be a lot better come this year when you got Minkah Fitzpatrick at that free safety spot. Obviously, Minkah Fitzpatrick is an absolute beast of a safety who had 6 interceptions last year. 6 interceptions. And when you look at the middle, Cole Holcomb, I think, is a pretty solid middle linebacker. Landon Roberts is a nice middle linebacker as well. And now you also have TJ Watt, who, I think he played like 10 games or something like that last year. So, he didn't have the sack number as you usually see with TJ Watt, who did just tie the record, not last year, but the year before that with, I believe, Michael Strahan, if I'm not mistaken. I like their defensive line. I think it's solid. Obviously, you got the veteran named Cam Hayward, who still is a very, very good defensive lineman. He had 10.5 sacks last year, which is pretty nice. Larry Ogunjobi is a nice defensive tackle. You're going to have Keanu Benton in the middle as a nose tackle, defensive tackle. I think he can do both. I think he's a great pass rusher. I think he's a good run stopper. So I'm very excited. And then you talk about the outside guys and the cornerbacks. You're going to have Joey Porter Jr. You're going to have Patrick Peterson, Levi Wallace. I think this is the weakest part of their defense is the cornerbacks, because we just don't know how well they're necessarily going to be. You have Joey Porter Jr. I think he'll be great, but he's still a rookie. Patrick Peterson, obviously we know how good he was in his prime, but he's not in his prime anymore. He's a very good zone coverage guy, which, again, one of the worries about that is, Steelers don't run that much zone. They're more of a man coverage guy, man coverage team. And Patrick Peterson at this age, this athletic ability that he's now with, obviously just because he's older, I'm interested to see how well he'll do in man coverage. And then you got Levi Wallace, who I don't think is a bad cornerback at all, So you got some pretty decent guys. I like Marvin Leal as a depth backup on that defensive line. Obviously, we talked about rookie Nick Herbig, who I think is pretty good. One of the more underrated guys, in my opinion, is Corey Trice. Shout out to Brett Coleman there. He's a pretty good corner who they got in the 7th round. Keanu Neal, I think he'll be a nice safety. He can play a little bit of linebacker as well. So, again, I like their depth. The Nick Witkowski, I think, is a solid linebacker, definitely backup linebacker. So, this Steelers defense is going to be really fun. And I think they'll be better stats-wise, record-wise. Maybe not. We'll talk about that, at the end of the video. So, again, interested. I think their defense definitely has a chance to be top 10 next year again. They lost some guys like, Cameron Sutton, who I think could be a hole in this defense for this year. But again, we'll see. And let's go ahead and talk about the next team. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Comment down below, what did I get right and wrong about this team? And subscribe while you're at it. And hit the notification bell if you're still waiting for your team to get talked about. And if you want to see the full preview of this team's division, go ahead. The video should be on the screen right now. Peace out.